Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Ferrari. This film was directed by Michael Mann. There have been a ton of biopics that are kind of backloading the end of the year as per usual for Oscar consideration, and lately there's just so many of them it feels like a blur to me, and you know my opinions on the majority of them because I've done reviews for them. I struggled with the majority of them from a cohesion standpoint, with the exception of maybe a couple. But I'm going to put Ferrari along with the ones that I do like because I found myself pleasantly surprised by this film. Movies like Maestro, as an example, I really struggled with just because I found it to be really pretentious. It felt like we were overworking a lot of elements because we felt we had a big responsibility, and because of that it all kind of fell apart. There's no flow, there's lack of a firm core at the center, and thus it starts to feel really reductive as a work. But it's deceptive in that just because, you know, it's very sophisticated, very glossy, it's got a lot of, you know, big names attached to it. And Napoleon was another one where it's like I enjoyed aspects of it for sure. There were certain scenes that were really engaging me, but ultimately it was really chaotic, and it absolutely could not find the balance between more the war, the politics, you know, the leader as the man as well as the intimate life, the man as the lover. But I think a film like Ferrari actually succeeds in the areas that both of those films that I just mentioned did not, and that's of course just my opinion. But yeah, there was a grandiosity to it. It's very cinematic, and yet it's pulled back. There's a lot going on in the film, and yet it feels tight from an editing perspective. And I think it balances the elements of all that like melodic, operatic, very Italian type of emotional center, but it's kind of matting it down a little bit with some maybe terseness, maybe steeliness that really intrigued me, and it's something that we see a lot from Michael Mann. And I like the way that the business, the machine, like the car aspects of things, the mechanics of things, work as an extended metaphor for the rest of the film. There's a line in the movie, and it's in the trailer, but it's, you know, like two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same moment in time. That's spoken by Adam Driver. And this is a character who has a lot of responsibility in the film, where a lot of different things are converging at the same time. He has essentially two wives, not really, but you know, he has a wife and then another woman he fell in love with at a certain point, and he had a child with her, but never mentioned it. So again, it's that tightness, every aspect of things mattering in the story, how every decision in the film does have a major consequence. And so I like that. I like the familial responsibility in the film and how it's mirroring, you know, more the Ferrari business, the success of it, and how time, the clocks, the ticking and all of that is contributing, I think, to a bigger picture throughout the film. I think it works as a very rhythmic piece of filmmaking. It's orchestrated beautifully. There's just a flow to it that I've been missing in a lot of films as of late, and I'm talking about like the major releases. Every time I watch one, I'm shocked just how much the editing feels clogged. It's like there's something lodged and we can't get beyond it. With this movie, like I said, our main character, Ferrari, he has a lot of different roles he's taking on in this movie because he's a father, he's a husband, he has to be a provider in business, but also to his family obligations. And again, all of it is kind of coming together and it's getting very tangled, and yet the experience, so far as how it's presented to us, feels very organized. As an example, Ferrari lost his first son with his wife, and that obviously heavily impacted their relationship, and they no longer have love for each other in the same way. And like I said, he has this responsibility to this new younger son, and yet he also has a responsibility to his racers in a sense. They almost do feel like his children at a certain point. And I like the way that they show Ferrari as a businessman because he is very no-nonsense and he's very serious about what he wants, and yet you can sense that there's somebody that cares at the same time. It's never one note, I would say. As in, this movie isn't some like rags to riches tale, thank God. It's more about the weight of consequences once you've built that success already. You have this big, beautiful thing, but you know, it's not going to last ultimately. It's like no businessman, no rich businessman, you know, like doesn't have blood on his hands, and no rich businessman of this caliber especially doesn't have some enemies, or people that are trying to break him down, break down that reputation. There's always a target on your back when you are rich to this degree. And yeah, so you can always feel that tension. Again, however pulled back, it always remains forward. It feels very much like your hand is on the clutch. And while this isn't a literal image or anything, it's almost like I can feel Adam Driver's character, his heart pounding, almost like you can see like his pulse through his neck or something like that. And yet, ironically, the face shows no signs of weariness, really no signs of major emotion. And I think that's a beautiful thing because it does feel very real. It feels authentic to this world, I would say, because the facades that we wear are often crucial to our survival. And I like how there are scenes in this film that do feel generic in the sense of like you could see the same type of editing, the same type of sequence done by some other big Hollywood director for a film of this level. And yet I was really, again, pleasantly surprised by kind of the twist that was put on it here. As an example, one of the scenes that I really liked was the opera scene. There's a sequence where a lot of the main characters in the movie all go to this big opera performance. And of course, what do you think that the scene is going to function as? It's a performance on screen that's very like meta, art imitates life, and it's going to mirror a lot of the emotions of our real life characters, whether it's literal or not. And it's such a common trick, and it can come off as very pompous or whatever for an artist, but I think it's more the way that you do it. And I like the way it was done here. I think it's because typically when you do like opera scenes, they typically take place at some big climax in a movie, and it's more emphasizing like the opulence of everything, the melodrama of it, particularly with Italian opera. And yet here, it felt very stripped down and intimate, but like the emotion was very much at the forefront. It's like the camera is very close to the actors. It's not separate from the stage. It's up on the stage with them. And you can just feel that undercurrent of emotion, that thick haze with the rest of the characters as we start going into a montage where we see the way they're all impacted while the music is still going. This scene was a really nice break of reflection, and it didn't have to lead us into those melodramatic points in the story because they already exist. We've already been given them. And I also feel that Penelope Cruz, who plays Ferrari's wife in the film, you know, she's providing the real pathos for the film. She's giving the film that real meat because she's very, very fiery in this film. It's a fantastic performance. There's something to her effect where she's just smoldering. She is dark. She is seductive. It's almost like if you have a log and you can see like the burning embers in it. That's how I feel about her in this movie. Her pain and her tragedy, her deep need to be heard and to be able to take care of herself on her own terms. All of that is very important. I think we're on her side, at least I was, and I think she just sold it beautifully. And there's something to that wild energy about her where she reminds me of like as if she was somebody who was accused of being a witch, and they tried to drown her, whatever, but it didn't work. And now she's coming back. She is trudging through water like Mary in Carnival of Souls at the beginning. And it's like, yeah, she's just not going to give it up. And then you have Adam Driver, by contrast. He did his job so far as understanding, I think, the Michael Mann style and understanding there needs to be that break, I think, from the emotion and the tension. That's very instinctually right, I would say, for the film. But somehow it kept him from becoming fully dimensional for me. I wanted his character to feel closer to me as the film goes on, especially as his wife is starting to break down those barriers slowly. It feels like we're doing like recycled House of Gucci inspiration, but it obviously works way, way, way better in this film. I would say though, and I've mentioned this before, my problem with Adam Driver is just that when he made his transition to become like a big dramatic actor where he's working with all the great Hollywood directors and all of that, there was something about that transition that just never really worked for me. For example, I was such a fan of him in the show Girls. I think he is absolutely phenomenal in that film because there's something just so untamed and unique and funny and quirky and disturbing about that performance. And it's fearless. He created a whole person, a whole presence that was unlike anybody I had ever seen before. Watch his audition tapes for that. Again, they're just phenomenal. And I feel like maybe it was a situation where he was awarded just the perfect role that perfectly suited all of the things that he was strongest at so far as his acting abilities are concerned. And then when he transitions and he starts again, you know, working in the big leagues, it almost felt like he was trying to rise to the occasion rather than it just kind of working authentically. And it's strange just because it's like you can tell that he's a really strong actor. He has experience. The technique is very sound for sure. And yet no matter how amazing the director is that he's working with, whether it's like Leos Carax or Spike Lee or Martin Scorsese, and there's just a disconnect for me where I can sort of see the technique. I can always sort of see the wheels turning. I can see the conscious choice to step into these big shoes rather than just being kind of instinctual, though I understand when you have opportunities like Adam Driver, you absolutely want to take them, so I can't fault him too much. But yeah, there's just a feeling of, it's almost like somebody who's wearing all of these designer suits, and it's like, no, they should be wearing jeans. The character of Adam in Girls, it feels like it was absolutely written for Adam Driver, and it's like you can't imagine anybody else playing that role. And I kind of have the same feeling about Shailene Woodley in the film Ferrari. She's playing, you know, the woman that he has the affair with and the second child with, where it just felt like she couldn't quite rise to the occasion. She couldn't quite match the drama in the material. She's fantastic in the right roles, and I've seen her do the kinds of things where it's like, I can only see her playing this role. But again, this is just not one of them. There was something about her energy here. It is very girl next door, but it needs to have some gravitas, some emotional maturity, because her character is in a very complicated position. And I wanted to be able to understand that just through her carriage, just through her mood. I think we need to feel that weariness and that melancholia, but it's got to be very practical because she's still a mom. who has responsibilities. She doesn't have time for that. But Woodley just does not match Penelope Cruz at all. And I think that's partially by design, but at the same time, I think there needed to be maybe just a little bit more balance between the two of them. The strength of her femininity should have been stronger, I think, in contrast to that darker, more kind of dominant energy of Penelope. And I just think it would have been more interesting to have that slight comparison between the two ladies. You know, it's like this thread that they're both the two women in Ferrari's life that he fell for. So it's like, what is that connection? But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this film. I found it refreshing. I was glad that it wasn't trying to make some sort of grandiose feminist point about Ferrari's wife ultimately being the one who runs the show and runs his success. Not at all. It's much more complicated than that. There's a complicated back and forth between them constantly, and the accomplishments of the man are not all summed up by the feminine presence in his life, like Maestro does in a very reductive way. And it was also just really refreshing to see a movie that lacked all the chaos from a plot structure perspective, and where it didn't have to go on for 3 hours incessantly, you know, just like Napoleon, as I mentioned. This was told in, I think, the perfect amount of time. I was always pleased with it. I was always invested. I never felt really a break in the flow. And I did find some of the tonal choices to be maybe off-kilter isn't the right term to use, but there was just something about it that always had me engaged in ways I'm not typically engaged. And so, yeah, this was a fun time. I absolutely recommend it. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commissioned portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons, who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.